I wanted to talk with you about, the different genres of poetry. And I was thinking about what Aristotle says in the Poetics, that the poet, and you know as well as I do that the poet in Aristotle's world in ancient Greece was a title that belonged to people who worked in many different crafts, such as theater, painting, whatever. And when he says that a poet should speak not in his own language, then,
or in his own voice.
Yeah, in his own voice. Then I, thought about, yes, but what voice should he speak in then? And I think that is a question one has to ask, because if you just said you don't do that, okay, then what should I do? And I'm not going to blame Aristotle for anything, but that is left unresolved there.
And I think this is a fundamental point, because it tells you that the point is storytelling and not self-expression. I remember I learned so much from that conversation with Cheng Wu, just to sort of circle in on the topic here. This period in Chinese painting, the 10th century, where they had a concept which translates as "me is not there." And then when it goes down and they start with big signatures and writing on these paintings, then it's "me is there." So it's the same idea, that you shall not be the voice, but what is happening there shall be the voice.
But then, that can easily be misunderstood, because I can speak from my own experiences that when I've written poetry, the few times I have done it, I've always had to mix in some of myself in a way. Like, I have experienced something and I want to write about that experience. Sometimes I've sat down and thought, I'm going to construct a perfect poem, and all these rules, blah blah blah, and that goes very bad. But with this Chinese painter, obviously it is his perspective. He's looking at this landscape. He's drawn to that landscape, but he's not mixing himself into it, his persona into it.
Well, I think the point was also that you studied so many times that it's nature that you are emulating, not your own voice. Of course it is you standing there, that's fine.
It has to be an element of pathos in there that comes from the spectator.
It's because the alternative would be indifference, and that's
camera.
That's not the way to go. This is why I was so struck by that. Your the man who taught your mother fiddle, who said that originality is are the faults you make as you imitate your master. So you're trying to reach something that is of really high quality, but unfortunately we can still see that it's made by you. And that, so of course there's something there that is, your personality, some whatever, I don't know. But I was thinking, when we talk about Aristotle, and his major thing is action, not character. And I've sort of had a little existential crisis because I know, as you know, Moby Dick is one of my brain damages, and that, as I talked with Carl Korsnes about, I can understand that people can perceive that as quite boring. Luckily, I heard it on audiobook, so I was just captivated by it. But a lot of things that happens there is characterization and animation, and making things sort of into a pantheistic totality. It's not really about something happening. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit. And I'm thinking, how does he make it work? Well, one thing is that he makes everything extremely important. And I don't know if that is, because there's another thing too. The painter Anne Herrero, I talked with her a little bit, and she mentioned, I don't know if you heard about this, Hemingway talked about the iceberg theory.
Iceberg theory?
Yeah, it's like you see 1/8 or 1/9 or whatever, and the rest is under,
But in relation to what, literature?
To a work.
Okay.
So, and I can understand that, but in the same time, it can easily sort of trick you into believing that, I know that there's so much deep things beneath here, but you only see this little on the surface. And that can really trick you into just sort of making boring portraits if you think that is enough, right?
That to have a lot of things underneath.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing when you look at Andrew Wyeth, for example.
Yeah.
He manages to pull that off. It's not Baroque in any shape, way, or form, but he manages in the best works to make it so important that it is some kind of a narrative after all.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, but I mean, I want to go back to the start here with Aristotle, and you should not use your own voice. Then what voice should you use? And I think that the examples you came up with, where it was a lot of different examples, which is good, because I think that the voice the poet should speak in is the voice of his chosen direction. You know, if you choose opera, there are sets of rules. If you choose the novel form, there are sets of rules. If you choose paintings, it's a set of rules.
So,
and I think that, and that's really striking to me, that people have different talents, but very often those who become really the best are those who understand the craft they are entering into and the certain rules. For example, in painting, I mean, what is unique to painting? What do you have to do in order to take advantage of the form we call painting?
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking about when it comes to Save the Cat, that book on screenwriting. That there's so much you can learn from it as a painter, because it teaches you to not think in arty ways.
Yes.
But you cannot literally translate how each scene shall be followed by another scene and how that shall develop. You cannot, because you're working on one image. But then when you're talking about Aristotle then, and that you shall not speak in your own voice, you're saying that you have to understand the premise of the actual discipline you're working in. But you're not talking about, I'm thinking about how things
Well, I think sometimes when people say you have to find your own style, I mean, it's most a cliche, but there is some truth in it, that you have to choose a style and stick to it and learn it properly. And I think, as you mentioned with...
But do you mean discipline? Like painting?
Well, I think you can even transfer it over to a style. I mean, even, you know, with odd, you can see some students who compose in a little bit Baroque way. You can see some students who compose in a Renaissance way more.
Renaissance,
and some people who compose more like the French Renaissance. I mean, like Claude Lorrain, big landscape, small figures. And those different styles follow a little bit different rules.
Your character.
You cannot just mix everything into the mix master and everything you love, you know, and then, I mean, because if you do that with food, you get this greasy, horrible drink. And it's the same with painting or literature. And, you know, I've noticed with literature, since you mentioned Moby Dick, something interesting about literature is that even the length changes the form. So, Moby Dick is a big book, fairly big book. The bigger a book is, firstly, it has to be tragic. But it can also be quite boring for quite many pages. It doesn't matter, you know? Some of the greatest literature in the world has some very boring passages. Everything from Dostoevsky to...
But why would that be necessary?
That is a question, but which we can come back to. But it's not... It can be boring. It's not a big problem. But if you go a little bit smaller in format to a short book, if it's boring, it's a catastrophe. But also, it cannot be as tragic. If you go down to a short story, then it has to have a sort of humorous point at the end. So the shorter the story is, the more comedic you have to make it. It can't be so tragic. And if you pull it all down to one sentence, an aphorism, if it's not funny, you're dead. You know? So even the different lengths follow different sets of rules. I mean, you have the short stories by Roald Dahl, you know? Very clear structure. It's something mysterious, it builds up, and then towards the end you get a sort of a shock relation. What is it called? Shock? Revelation. Which is quite funny, you know? You don't do that in Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a big, epic book. It can be boring for many pages, it doesn't matter. It's a complete different kind of form.
Thank you for checking out this video from the Cave of Pallas. If you want to watch the entire segment, head over to caveofapallas.com/donate. and become a $5 patron. Then you can access our masterclasses, bonus material with our guests, painting videos, and more.